Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask-strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1015 for July 30th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
This will impact whiskies maybe in 10, 15 years' time as our youngest expressions of G&amp whiskey, but there'll always be whiskies which we keep for many, many years after that. So, we will still be bottling Gordon MacPhail whiskies in 50 plus years.
This week, Gordon MacPhail shocked the whiskey world with the announcement that it will stop filling casks with new make spirit from other distilleries starting next year. The company plans to focus its future on whiskies from Benromach and the new Cairn distillery that opened last year. It's a change whiskey lovers won't really notice for more than a decade, and I'll discuss it with Gordon MacPhail Managing Director Ewen Mackintosh later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
How about a really great 12-year-old Scotch whiskey? I have a stellar recommendation coming up for you in just a minute. Spoiler alert, it's Dewar's 12-year-old.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Robin Redbreast? You may have seen me around. Face label, label face. Yeah, that's the one. I'm now contractually obligated to be their spokesbird. Yeah, my agent didn't read the small print.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dràm Mòr. We have some retirements and departures to kick off the news this week. Bruichladdich co-founder Simon Coughlin is retiring from his role as CEO of Remy Cointreau's whiskey division. He teamed up with Mark Rainier to bring Bruichladdich back to life in 2001 and took over as managing director after the distillery's sale to Remy Cointreau in 2012. Charlie Nelson is stepping down from his role as co-founder of Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery in Nashville, Tennessee. He has not announced his future plans yet. And Joseph O'Sullivan is leaving as master distiller at McCarthy's Clear Creek Distillery in Oregon. No word on his future plans either. There's another visitor experience being built on Louisville's Whiskey Row along Main Street, but this will be the first one with its own podcast studio. Pursuit Spirits plans to open its visitors center next year with a classroom and speakeasy bar, in addition to studio space for the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Ryan Cecil and Kenny Coleman have been bottling their own whiskeys since 2018 and won double gold medals for their Pursuit United Bourbon and Rye in this year's San Francisco World Spirits competition. Speaking of competitions, Tales of the Cocktail wrapped up this week with the announcements of its annual Spirited Awards and the New Orleans Spirits competition. Brooklyn's Kings County Distillery was named Distillery of the Year, while Balcones Texas 1 Single Malt was named the Whiskey of the Year, as well as Best American Single Malt. Kings County's Empire Rye and Pinhook's Vertical Series 7-Year-Old Rye tied for Best Rye Whiskey honors. Iron Root Republic's Saints Alley Bourbon Herald Special Edition was named the Best Bourbon, and Heaven Hill's Bernheim Wheat Whiskey was named the Best Wheat Whiskey. We have a link to the complete list of award winners in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. In the annual Spirited Awards, congratulations to the Macallans Nicola Risk on being named Best International Brand Ambassador. Sips in Barcelona was named the world's best bar, while Century Grand in Phoenix was named the best U.S. cocktail bar. Once again, we have a link to the complete list of award winners at whiskycast.com. In other news, public health advocates have long claimed that alcohol advertising encourages people to drink. But a new study from the Institute for Economic Affairs refutes that hypothesis. The study found that between 1991 and 2001, alcohol advertising decreased by nearly 11% in the UK, but alcohol consumption rose by nearly 16% during that same period. The study's author says advertising can affect an individual brand's market share, but the amount of money spent on alcohol ads has no effect on overall consumption. Welsh single malt whiskey is the first UK spirit to get geographical protection under the UK's new post-Brexit GI scheme. The scheme was designed to ensure that certain UK food and drink products could secure legal protection against imitators and covers all 6 distilleries currently operating in Wales. New whiskies unveiled this week. Jack Daniel's has released the latest in its distillery series line of experimental whiskies. This one is finished in añejo tequila barrels that had first been used at Jack Daniel's before being sent to Mexico. It's the 11th release in the distillery series and is available at the distillery in Lynchburg and select Tennessee retailers. Angus Dundee Distillers is reviving the Glencadam 18-year-old Highland single malt. The 18-year-old disappeared from the lineup several years ago because of a lack of supply, dating back to when the distillery was mothballed between 1999 and 2003. But there are enough stocks now to ensure a permanent supply. It's available worldwide with a recommended retail price of £145 a bottle. Meanwhile, Aberfeldy is adding to its red wine cask collection with a new 18-year-old single malt finished in Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon wine casks. It's a cousin to last year's 15-year-old Cabernet Sauvignon finish and will be available through the distillery's website at first before rolling out to retailers in the UK, France, Germany, and the US. Wolf Craig master blenders Richard Patterson and Ian McMillan have created the second blend in the Wolf Craig lineup. It's a 14-year-old blend that uses whiskey matured in ex-bourbon barrels along with aged sherry casks. It'll launch in August with a recommended retail price of £80 a bottle. In the U.S., Wyoming whiskey is out with its annual Wyoming exclusive release. This year's whiskey is named Integrity and honors former U.S. Senator Alan Simpson with a 7-year-old bourbon. It's available through the distillery and Wyoming retailers exclusively. And out of Ireland, Teeling Whiskey Company has released the second edition in its Wonders of Wood collection. It's a single-pot still Irish whiskey matured in virgin Portuguese oak barrels. It sells through the Teeling website for €80 a bottle, with part of the proceeds going to help plant native Irish tree species in Ireland. And finally, congratulations go out to our good friend Serge Valentin. His Whiskey Fun website marked its 21st anniversary this week. It's a valuable source of tasting notes for thousands of whiskeys. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by the Dràm Mòr.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dràm Mòr. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Time now for our calendar and a look at upcoming whiskey events around the world. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. If you're in the New York City area, Suntory Whiskey has a pop-up experience at Hudson Yards this Tuesday through Thursday. The Mob Museum and Speakeasy in Las Vegas is hosting a Benromach tasting on Wednesday night. The Whiskey Show is coming up this Saturday in Melbourne, Australia, and the Brandy Library in New York City has a worldwide whiskey tasting on Saturday as well. Tasmanian Whiskey Week runs from the 7th through the 13th in and around Hobart, Australia. Whiskey Live Perth is on the 11th and 12th in Perth, Australia. The annual Royal Mile Whiskies Whiskey Fringe runs from the 18th through the 20th in Edinburgh, Scotland. And Sagamore Spirit Distillery's next Whiskey on the Waterfront party is on August 19th in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendar at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The calendar is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. 2 homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, But the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlach and the Classic Malts lineup. Gordon and MacPhail has released some of the oldest whiskies ever bottled, ranging from 70 to 80 years old. The one thing they all had in common is that they were originally filled into casks at Mortlach, Glenlivet, and other distilleries as new make spirit directly for Gordon and MacPhail to mature. It's a practice that's been going on for decades, but this week Gordon and MacPhail stunned whiskey lovers with the announcement that it will stop filling new make into casks next year, so that it can eventually focus on the whiskies from the two distilleries the company owns, Benromach and the new Cairn distillery. I spoke with Gordon and MacPhail Managing Director Ewen Mackintosh this week. Why make this change at this time? After so many years as an independent bottler, I know it's going to take you a few years to work through the current stocks, but why make this change now?
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a natural evolution for the business. I think the foundations of this decision were almost set back when we started the process of buying Benromach. That need for the business to have security of supply of spirit was one of the. No, it was there in the past. George Urquhart looked at buying a distillery, many years ago. And that eventually came true with Benromach. So we had then one distillery, then the completion of the Cairn last year, and that coming on stream by a second source of supply, just allows us to take a different view on the business looking forward and to future generations. And I think for a business which has been, proudly independent for 128 years, for future generations, we want to leave the business with its control in its own hands, and that is then focusing in on Benromach, the Cairn, and whatever else comes down the track in years to come. But those are the brands that we control from start to finish. We're not sort of reliant on other people giving us their fillings.
And that source of fillings has dried up a little bit in recent years, hasn't it?
It's just evolved, Mark. I think I've been doing this job now for 30 plus years, and it's definitely different to when I started in the industry. But that's because the independent bottling scene has changed as well. When I started, independent bottlers were offering the whiskies which weren't available from the distillery owner. Their focus was elsewhere. They didn't bottle a large number of single malt or whiskies from those distilleries. Whereas today, most distilleries have a representation of a bottling from the distillery owner. So that playground for an independent bottler to play in has changed dramatically. And with that focus changing for the distillery owners, access to fillings change as well. So over the years, we've lost some availability of fillings, but we've also gained them. But it's not necessarily the driving factor. We've always wanted that complement and not compete aspect to it. We've always seen ourselves sort of sitting on an island, not the official bottling, but not an independent bottling either. We offer something which is completely different to what the official bottling is, and that space is just changing. It's very difficult to complement now with the wide variety of single malts available.
How long will it take you to work through the aging stock that you already have? Probably, at least 15 years or more?
Oh, much more than that, Mark. The stock which we have, decades and decades. Whiskey which we are filling this year as our last year will be kept for 50 plus years. Just the same philosophy we've always had of laying down stock for much older aging. So, this will impact whiskies maybe in 10, 15 years' time as our youngest expressions of G&amp whiskey, but there'll always be whiskies which we keep for many, many years after that. So, we will still be bottling Gordon MacPhail whiskies in 50 plus years.
I'm curious how this went over with the family, because this is filling independent casks or filling casks was something that Mr. George had pioneered and the ancestors had pioneered. And this moves away from the company's philosophy in a way, doesn't it?
I think it's a change, but I think if you look back through our history, Mark, you'll seen the changes that the company's done to roll with the changing environment that it's operated in. So when we started, if you go right the way back to the Gordon MacPhail merchant in South Street in Elgin, we were buying single malts, and we never did the blend as the other merchants did, the John Walker and Sons, the Shivers brothers. We concentrated on single malts. We then started the sort of licensed bottling part of the business, which was this partnering with distilleries and using their labels and being the licensed bottler for that single malt. That then changed again to be the independent bottling, and I think it's important to recognise the difference between that licensed bottling sort of operation and the independent bottling side of things, where we are putting whiskey under our label. So it's bottled as a Gordon MacPhail bottling from whatever distillery. Then we buy a distillery. Now we've built a distillery. So I think you can see over the period, the company has evolved because the whiskey environment around us has changed. So I think the family realise that that's been part of the DNA of the business, is really rolling with the changing circumstances. And as I say, the decision to cease filling was almost set back in 1993 when we purchased Benromach, that would become the focus for years to come, and for future generations. We'd be laying down a whiskey that we distilled, put into casks ourselves, and have looked after for many generations. So I think no doubt a tough decision, and one which, has a very much a looking back the way. But I think it's important to look forward as well to say, well, what do we want for generations 5, 6, and 7 of the family in years to come?
As you said, this represents a natural evolution for the business in terms of the bottling side, but also the business has been evolving on the retail side too. You got rid of the grocery store in the shop in Elgin and are changing the shop around into an experience. Tell me how that's going.
It's a big job. We're completely refurbishing the building inside and out. So there's a lot of work being done with the sort of sandstone and the facing on the outside of the building. And we are completely stripping out the inside to create this, as you say, a must-visit destination. So very much about coming and learn about the history of Gordon MacPhail as a company, learn about the role we've played in the sort of evolution of single malts, learn a little bit about whiskey, and also get access to some of the fantastic liquids we've got. So you'll be able to taste them, you'll be able to buy them as the retail shop you were always able to do, but very much more focusing on it's something you can't buy online, which I think is a really important aspect. To get this sort of full sort of experience of Gordon MacPhail and the history of us, you have to come and visit us here in Elgin, and we'll look after you very well. We'll give you access to whiskies which are from our archives, etc. And yes, you can walk away with a lovely bottle, but come and see us.
You mentioned that you've been doing this 30 plus years and are getting ready to retire next year. How has the business changed since you started?
That's a really good question. It's changed and it hasn't. I think the philosophies and the values of the business have remained constant all the way through. I think as I just go back, I think we've evolved over that period. I've seen the purchase of Benromach and the growth of Benromach into a sort of something we're all incredibly proud of. I've seen the Gordon MacPhail portfolio develop and evolve to where it is today. And being involved in the creation of the Cairn is something I'll take immense pride in. So I think we quite often talk about in the business you are just a custodian, and I think I look back on my 30 years and the people I've worked with and what we've been able to do is I feel confident handing the baton on to the next person. that we've done our bit to leave the business in a better place than when we started.
Will your successor come from within the family or be another non-family member?
It's a completely open process. We're out at the moment. The role's been advertised, so it's a process which is open to family and non-family. So nothing has been decided yet.
What are you going to take away from this next year when you step down?
A great deal of pride, Mark. I think I've loved my time with the company. I think very fortunate to have spent my whole career here. I've worked with some fantastic people, both in the company and I think in the industry. I think I'll take away great memories of Gordon MacPhail, but some great friendships as well. I think our industry is built on friendships, relationships, camaraderie. And I think it's something which is unique to, I would say, the Scotch whisky industry, but I think, the wider spirits industry has got a lot of that sort of joint and sort of collaboration sort of spirit built into it. So I take away with it sort of a great pride and, some great friendships, which I'll hopefully be able to retain afterwards as well.
Anything else you can add I didn't ask about?
I think the thing I would reflect on just having announced the news about this specific decision is just to reinforce that I believe it's a really positive step for the company. I know it's for a lot of whiskey drinkers and people who know Gordon MacPhail really well, it's perhaps come as a bit of a shock and a surprise. But I think it is a really positive step for us. I think it allows us to focus on our own brands, the Benromach, and ready ourselves for the launch of the Cairn single malt in years to come. And not to lose sight of that Gordon MacPhail whiskies will be part of our portfolio for many, many years to come. So there's still some great whiskies sitting in our warehouses to be released. But it's a decision which is the right one for the company looking forward.
I know that there's a lot of talk that you guys will be the first ones to release a 100-year-old single malt. Is that the goal eventually?
I have no doubts, Mark, that there is a cask of whiskey in our warehouses which will make it to 100 years. I think I've been in the role that Stuart Uckert now does in terms of being the sort of the gatekeeper for our stocks. And I know there are casks there which have the quality and the attributes to make it to 100 years old. So I'm very confident there will be at some point. Yeah, absolutely. We're still looking about 30 years away for that, probably, right? Yeah. It's still a wee bit away. I hope I might still be around when that one happens, and they remember me in my retirement.
As Ewen noted, the supply of new young whiskies from casks filled in the last couple of years will start to run out around the time whiskey from the Cairn distillery is ready to be bottled 12 years from now. There's also an added benefit. With the supply of casks getting tighter on the market, the move will allow Gordon and MacPhail to divert casks that had been destined for filling at other distilleries to be used instead at Benromach and The Cairn, relieving some of the pressure on supply. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with an Islay classic, the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. It's bottled at 46.3% ABV, and the nose has touches of charred oak, grilled fruits, dark chocolate, and salted caramel. The taste has a nice balance of grilled fruits, salted caramel, dark chocolate, and honey notes, while the finish is long and fruity with just a whiff of smokiness. I'm scoring the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old a 93. Next up, Lost Lantern Whiskey's Summer of Bourbon continues with a single cask bottling from Iron Root Republic Distilling in Denison, Texas. This one is a whopper. It's bottled at 68.6% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel candy, baked apples, cocoa powder, and honey. The taste is astringent and peppery with a hint of mesquite and notes of honey and baked apples. The finish, long and peppery. I'm scoring the Lost Lantern Iron Root Republic Single Cask Bourbon a 92. Let's close with a couple of Dràm Mòr independent bottlings. The Blair Athol 2011 was bottled at 11 years old at 56% ABV. The nose on this Highland single malt is fruity and floral with a hint of nutmeg, dried fruits, and a touch of garden herbs. The taste is fruity and peppery with white pepper, allspice, nutmeg, and dried fruits, while the finish has lingering spices and a touch of garden herbs. I'm scoring the Dràm Mòr Blair Athol 2011 bottling a 90. Now, Dràm Mòr's 2013 Glengarry bottling was matured in an ex-Islay peated whiskey hogshead cask. It's bottled at 57.1% ABV. The nose is malty with touches of dried fruits and charred oak. The taste is thick and creamy with a slight smokiness and subtle spices balanced by red apples, pears, a hint of caramel candy, and barley sugar. The finish is long and woody with a kiss of smoke. I'm scoring the Dràm Mòr Glengarry 2013 single cask bottling a 91. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,500 different whiskies from all over the world. Check it out this week at the all-new WhiskyCast.com.
Gabriel here. The new Dewar's 12-year-old has been completely remastered to be richer, smoother, and more balanced. It's a total winner. It's double-aged in first-fill premium bourbon casks for greater depth and breadth of flavor, with notes of apples, lemon zest, and spicy and floral notes with a long, smooth vanilla finish. The experts agree too. It's winning awards like pros sink putts. In fact, WhiskyCast's own Mark Gillespie gave it a 94-point rating, which is pretty amazing for a 12-year-old Scotch. It's also earned a 94-point rating from Whiskey Advocate. That makes it their highest-rated 12-year-old Scotch whiskey. It's an excellent testament to the skill, craft, and refinement of the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey, Dewar's. Drink responsibly. Copyright 2023 Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app for some of this week's comments. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. I've mentioned the last couple of weeks that we've redesigned the WhiskyCast website, and Ken Goldenberg from Orange County, California, posted this comment in the app this week. Mark, the updated WhiskyCast website really looks good. It is a lot easier to navigate for sure, and both the graphics and photos stand out so much better. Your team did a great job. Cheers to all of them, Ken. Thank you for the kind words, Ken. We appreciate it. Our friend Willem Killian came up with a great idea for a poll this week. He wanted to see how many open bottles people who drink regularly keep around compared to people who don't drink whiskey regularly. Among those who drink whiskey 3 days or more per week, 63% have more than 20 bottles open. That's compared to just 38% for those who drink whiskey fewer than 3 days a week. Turning now to Twitter, I refuse to call it X, Christopher Malloy tweeted this question the other day. Mark, I might have missed it, but did you happen to mention the closing of Anchor Distilling and Brewing in San Francisco? Well, I can see where the closing of Anchor Brewing a couple of weeks ago might have confused Chris and other whiskey lovers, since Anchor Distilling operated out of the same facility with the same ownership for years. But when Sapporo bought Anchor Brewing several years ago, the distilling side of the business was spun off and merged with Price Imports to create Hodeling & Company. Hodeling moved its distilling operation for Old Potrero Rye out of the Anchor Brewing plant to a different location in San Francisco after the spin-off, and is not affected at all by the closing of the brewery. If you have a question, suggestion, or anything else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app from the Apple or Google App Stores and join the conversation. You can also reach us on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey, where they explore the frontiers of natural flavor one farm at a time to create unique Irish whiskies. Visit them on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history and science that makes whiskey unique. As we close out July, it's worth noting that this month is the 200th anniversary of the Excise Act of 1823. It's the UK law that set up a scheme for Scotland and Ireland's thousands of illicit distillers to go legal and get licensed. The licenses cost £10 each back then, along with a tax on each gallon of spirit produced. The impetus for passing the act was the Duke of Gordon, who proposed in the House of Lords that the government should allow distillers to become legitimate, at the same time generating a source of income for grain farmers. Keep in mind that the Duke of Gordon was the landlord for many illicit distillers, including one George Smith, who was known for making Glenlivet whiskey. But Smith was just one of many, many illicit distillers of the early 19th century. By the time the Excise Act was passed in 1823, excisemen were confiscating thousands of illegal stills every year, but the passage of the act helped end most illicit distilling. It was the first semi-successful attempt to tax whiskey in Scotland and Ireland, and of course George Smith became the first licensed distiller under the scheme when he got the Glenlivet licensed in 1824. They'll be celebrating their 200th anniversary next year. Now, the Excise Act also set up quality standards. It made it illegal to distill whiskey and other spirits from sugar or anything other than malted barley, corn, or grain, with a fine of £200 for violators. A lot of money back then. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, email us at comments@whiskycast.com or get in touch with us through the WhiskyCast community app. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the new WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple or Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Find the new Dewar's 12-year-old and discover what all the awards are about. You can toast and thank me later. From Dewar's, the world's most awarded blended Scotch whisky.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.